Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the Voice of Reason. Today we are discussing the ongoing situation between China and Taiwan. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the dynamics of the conflict, and especially of the reason the U.S. is not moving more equipment that Taiwan has purchased into Taiwan. Namely, there's about 60 F-16 Vipers that are still on order. There are a number of other systems as well, quite frankly, billions and billions of dollars worth of armaments that have not yet been delivered to Taiwan, also known as the Republic of China, the ROC. So why isn't the United States, if it truly fears that the Chinese, the People's Liberation Army, has the capability of attacking Taiwan and seizing control of Taiwan, you would think that the United States would be pumping Taiwan full of weapon systems, just like we see in Ukraine right now. Obviously, Taiwan is more important, especially in terms of the microchip industry, than Ukraine is. There is a much more strategic reason for the United States to help Taiwan rather than Ukraine. So why are we not seeing this happen? Well, the short answer is very simple. The United States really does not believe China is a threat to Taiwan. If China were to launch a military operation to seize the island, seize Taiwan, it would be the largest military operation, the most difficult military operation, quite possibly in human history. Even more difficult in terms of size and scope than the German invasion of Russia in 1941. So why is that? Well, for one thing, you have an ocean that separates China and Taiwan. 1 million Chinese troops are just not going to swim the 109-mile voyage across the Straits of Taiwan. They're not going to do that. They're going to need an amphibious fleet that is going to land forces on Taiwan. Could the Chinese build such a fleet? Yeah, they could. Absolutely. Have they done it yet? No, they have not. So that's one reason why the United States is not concerned. Could they use elements of their merchant fleet to land forces? Yes, they could. Would that be successful? It's unknown. But I don't think the Chinese are going to take that risk. And again, just the size and scope of the military operation that would need to take place to seize control of the island of more than 20 million people, that has a 200,000 person armed forces defending what is a fairly small space. I mean, from north to south, the island is essentially about 200 miles. 235 miles as a bird flies, north to south, west to east. It is essentially 83 miles. But this island is made up of mountains. Probably 2/3 of the island of Taiwan is made up of tropical rainforest mountains. Very difficult for an invading force to land and then seize control, especially if the terrain along the beaches is relatively flat. And I guess what I mean by that is the Taiwan artillery units, artillery battalion sets and combat units would have the protection of these highlands, heavily forested highlands just to the east of the beaches. And if you again, it's If you measure from the beach to the first chain of hills, it's about 7 miles. So that's one advantage. And again, the terrain is very difficult for an offensive force to land on these very limited number of beaches. In fact, there's not a lot of beaches on Taiwan, on the island, that are practical for amphibious operations. So the Taiwan military would be able to focus combat strength on some of these main beaches. Now the question is, well, could the Chinese land on the east? Could they do a big end around and land on the eastern portion of the island? They could. The Chinese could do that. But then the question is how far would they get? How far would they get? Would the United States intervene with its Virginia-class nuclear-powered attack submarines? Because obviously the United States would see the massing of these ships. And in all probability, the Taiwanese would start firing missiles at these ships if it became apparent that the Chinese were preparing for an amphibious operation. Now, again, landing on the East Coast, that even poses a more significant problem because it's a question that has been posed. The ability to land, there is just one route. If you land on the eastern coast of Taiwan, there's essentially two ways to get to Taipei, the capital. You can take the ocean road, the ring road around Taiwan. So you would have to land on a contested beach, marshal enough forces, and then start to move around the island. And that would be damn near impossible. I'll kind of show you why. Let's look at what these roads look like in terms of. Here we go. So this is the very narrow road that the Chinese would need to take to get to Taipei. And of course, I would pick a view in which a truck was there. So here we go. So they land someplace, and you can see why these beaches are very difficult to land on. There's not a lot of beaches. But this whole road runs along the coast, and what do you have directly to your left flank? Mountains. And this whole route all the way around would be the Taiwanese military. The second route, the second option, besides taking the coastal road to Taipei, which would be damn near impossible, would even be a more difficult route, and I don't know if I can find it on this map. I believe it is Highway 5. And the problem with that, and that essentially runs in this area here, it runs through the mountains. But half of that route is a tunnel. Highway 5 is a tunnel that runs through these mountains. And that's it. That's the only way sorry about that. That's the only way the Chinese would have the ability to get to Taipei from the eastern coast. Again, the coastal road, which to your left is essentially a mountain range in perpetuity. Or, is this it right here? But you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Just the difficulty of navigating, especially through this terrain. Look at this. Imagine you're the Chinese military, and the Taiwanese are in prepared defensive positions as you try to navigate around the island with 200,000 and a growing army beyond that 200,000 of the Taiwanese Defense Force. It would just be an incredibly difficult military operation, probably the most difficult military operation, I believe, in human history, especially given the modern capabilities that would exist for the Taiwanese military to resist the Chinese military. Yeah, the Chinese would be launching ballistic missiles. They would be launching cruise missiles. They would be hitting Taiwanese targets. But again, ultimately, they would have to land on the island. It would be a contested landing. And then what happens after that? Just unprecedented, brutal fighting in some incredibly mountainous terrain all over the island. So again, anywhere China were to land, it may have some early success. It may be able to have some success. But at the end of the day, the Taiwanese military is just going to start blowing bridges. They're going to start blowing canals. They're going to start blowing roads. You've got rice paddies on the western coast, followed by very, very heavy mountainous terrain to the east. And again, just a very, very difficult situation for the Chinese to overcome. And at this point, I believe that the United States believes as well that the Chinese simply don't have that capability. They're not there. And they're probably a long ways, actually, from being able to militarily take the island. Could they blockade the island? That's a different proposition, possibly. Possibly. Could they take some of the outer lying islands? Possibly. But taking the island of Taiwan itself? No. I don't believe they have that capability. And again, I don't think the United States believes they have that capability as well. I mean, think about Sea Lion. Sea Lion was the proposed operational name of the German invasion of Great Britain right after the fall of France. The Germans were preparing for an amphibious operation against the United Kingdom. And the Germans called it off. The United Kingdom, invading the United Kingdom from France, would be a more easy proposition because the south of England is relatively flat, relatively open. There are more beaches. It is not as defendable as what you would get on the island of Taiwan. And even then, the Germans called it off. It was an unknown. It was too risky. So they didn't do it. And again, I think that same risk, that risk tolerance for the Chinese is coming into play. At this point, they are highly unsure if they have the capability of seizing the island. We keep hearing about this sudden attack by China in which they would land paratroops and decapitate the government in Taipei. That's not going to happen. That is a false narrative. The Chinese are not going to conduct a rapid airborne operation followed by an amphibious invasion of Taiwan. They do not have the capability. It doesn't exist. And that's why the United States is not pumping these weapon systems into Taiwan, because they know. The Chinese invasion of Taiwan is a false narrative. They could blockade it. They could do other things that could cause a dire outcome for Taiwan in the world, but they can't take the island. They do not have that capability right now. Well, that's all I have for today. We will have more. We'll have a a third video for today. We'll be looking at the ongoing civil war in the former state of Ethiopia. Have a good day.